So let's talk a little bit about the idea of when spirituality gets in the way of healing. So sometimes people do use spirituality, spiritual terms, religious practices, religious jargon or language, or ideals, ideas, all these kinds of things, symbols, paraphernalia, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes we use this to the detriment of our personal growth, and I want to talk through that a little bit. So, in the 1980s, a person by the name of John Wellwood coined the phrase spiritual bypassing. And I'm not sure what his background was. I'm not sure kind of what he was getting at, but it is a thing that sometimes we bypass our personal growth by wanting to lean into our spiritual or religious beliefs rather than actually doing the work. And as a psychologist, I'm here to help people do the work. In fact, I told someone last week she's got to do the work if she wants to overcome this certain thing. I tell people that all the time. And it's this whole idea of, we've got to do the personal work. But what is spiritual bypassing? So, and I'm going to give you lots of examples throughout this video so that you can understand this. I've been doing mental health work for 38 years. I've been doing spiritual work for probably nearly that time without knowing it, but more formally for the last 20, 25 years. And it's one of those things where sometimes people don't even realize that they are using those as a coping mechanism. Sometimes they don't realize that they're not doing the work they need to do in order to grow and evolve, but their habit or their mindset is to always go to spirit, always go to religion, always go to prayer, always go to ritual without actually stopping long enough to do the work. And so I'm going to give you some examples, like I said, and I'm going to start with Buddhism. Now, John Wellwood, that's kind of where he started, is that he was looking at the spiritual beliefs and the rituals within Buddhism. And he took on the idea that, okay, sometimes it gets in the way of our personal growth because of the fact that Buddhism itself is about finding peace within. It's not about reactivity. It's not about, reacting or standing up for yourself. It's basically about finding peace within, which I completely love the concept, but I also understand where John Wellwood was coming from, because the other thing is that with Buddhism, one of the things that they teach is basically to observe the emotion but don't do anything with it. And observe the experience, observe what they call suffering, observe the discomfort that's within you. I absolutely agree with that part, but it's the not doing anything with it that bothers me, because as we know, there's research to back this, that if we don't deal with unresolved emotions, that it's going to turn into bodily symptoms or disease or illness in one way or another. So part of Buddhism makes absolute sense. But if you have a person who is really practicing Buddhism and they're not dealing with the emotions that are coming up within them, they might be observing them, noticing them, but they're not really doing anything with them, then that is going to be a problem. You've got to take action for whatever that emotion is trying to tell you. So that's kind of where John Wellwood was coming from. Another example is, again, I'm going to go there, Christianity. So I've had many people, many clients come to me and say, well, I'm just going to pray on that. I'm going to pray on that. I'm going to leave that up to God. I'm not going to do anything because God will take care of it. Well, from the human condition standpoint, God will not take care of things if we are not taking care of ourselves. And this is another challenge, because I'm not trying to dismiss belief systems at all. In fact, I value pretty much, maybe not all belief systems, but I value them because I know they bring peace to people. But you have to kind of think about, is someone putting off their own work, putting off their own agency within a situation in order to adhere to whatever religious, background they have or spiritual background they have? And sometimes we need to leave God out of it in order for us to realize that as individuals, we've got to make a difference. So, for example, in many Christian beliefs, you don't get divorced. You don't leave a marriage. But what about the extreme abusive relationships? What about the manipulative relationships? What about the betrayal? What if someone is, their partner's having many, many, many affairs, and, within a religion, the person is being told to stay? So from a personal growth perspective, you have to start looking at, does my belief system fit what I need to do in order to keep myself aligned and happy? Spiritualism. So spiritualism is kind of the path of going to mediums, going to psychics, going to that whole kind of existential etheric realm. I do this work. I actually do spiritual work. I do Akashic record readings. I do soul realignment work. And yet there are times when people will come to me and they'll think that just by coming to me for a reading or trying to understand from a spiritualism perspective, that's all they have to do. But again, you have to take the information that you're learning through those experiences and do something with them. Same thing with metaphysics. Wow, metaphysics is growing so much right now. The Tarot is coming back strong, and it's growing. Witchcraft and Wicca is coming back strong, and the whole idea of astrology is coming back strong. Astrology is the oldest, and this is what I call it, the oldest science. And, everybody, it's a growing, I think the research said that up to 80% of people now are starting to turn to astrology in order to solve life lessons, especially the millennial age. That is a big wave coming, is that, more and more people are turning to kind of the astrological realm. I love all of those realms. And yet, the way that I look at metaphysics is that we still have to do the work. And part of metaphysics, again, I believe in stone energy. I believe in aromatherapy. I believe in ritual. I believe in manifestation. I believe in all of those things. But if you are using those things to bypass actually understanding that you have to heal things within you and have to do the work to transcend or evolve beyond a situation, then you're not going to get anywhere. I want to give you an example of Mercury in retrograde. Mercury is in retrograde right now. For those of you who don't understand Mercury in retrograde, we have all of these celestial kinds of events that happen all the time. Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. Basically what it means is that in the, literally the outlay of the galaxy, Mercury comes zooming by Earth 3 times a year. When I say zooming by, we don't see this happen. We don't, only through a telescope do we see this happen. But there's a point where it creates a gravitational pull. It creates an energetic kind of pull on us. And, a lot of people want to blame things on Mercury in retrograde. Now, I personally believe that Mercury retrograde, full moon, things like that are there to bring stuff to the surface that already needs to be dealt with. But the whole point is learning how to deal with it. So I personally think that the universe has constructed this to basically bring stuff to the surface, so we actually have to look at it again and do the work to get past it. So Mercury in retrograde, emotions are higher, communication is off, technology can be wacky, all kinds of things that have to do with communication and kind of, again, our old stuff is coming up. And the whole thing is you can't blame communication problems on Mercury. You have to do the work if you're not a great communicator. If you have an argument with your spouse or partner during this time, you can't blame it on Mercury. You have to look at what is causing the argument to begin with, because it's probably a historical thing that is just happening to come up right now. So I am the first one to urge people to go to their spiritual beliefs and to really develop their spiritual beliefs and understand themselves from a spiritual perspective. That is my world. I am all about the soul. And yet the soul has to live within the context of each one of their belief systems. So whether it's Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. But it's that whole idea of, are we bypassing our personal growth? Are we using those to dismiss or explain away or kind of put off to the side what the work is that we actually have to do? And so I agree with what John Wellwood said, is that, okay, we have to look at, are we spiritually bypassing? Are we kind of leaning into those things rather than doing the work? So I'm going to give you some examples of this to kind of help you understand from a contextual perspective how this goes. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that, sometimes we say we're going to pray on it, we're going to pray on it, we're going to pray on it. Years ago, and I mean, probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I had a client who was very Christian-based, which, again, I try to embrace every spiritual perspective, every religious perspective, because to me, the best best definition of spirituality I've ever heard of is that which brings you peace. And so I don't care what it is that brings you peace as long as you realize that you still need to do the work. So anyway, this person came to me. She was a young person. She was married. She had 2 or 3 kids. I'm not really sure. But she was in a very, very tough situation at work, and it wasn't quite abusive, but it was definitely manipulative. And it was one of those things where she was, I don't know how to say it. She was just in turmoil about it. Part of it was her self-esteem and self-worth and confidence. Part of it was the fact that, of course, it's finances. You need to make money. But she kept saying, I'm going to pray on it. I'm going to pray on it. I'm going to pray on it. And it was okay for her the first few sessions when she said that, except that I realized that her meaning for that was, yeah, I'm just going to put that off and leave it up to God. I'm not going to do anything about it. And at one point when she said that, I said, I think we need to leave God out of this. I think this is a time where God wants you, or the universe, or whatever, is out there, wants you to make the decision, because you've been doing this for a very long time and you're not getting out of the situation. And she kind of looked at me, and then the next session she came back and she said, you're right. I have not been doing the work. I've been leaving it outside of myself to change something, whereas I have to learn to have the confidence to change these things myself. So again, sometimes we've got to leave God out of it in order for us to realize we have to do the work. It goes back to that old saying of, God sent all these rowboats past someone that's in a flood and they never got on the rowboat. Well, the rowboat is you. It's a matter of looking at it from that perspective of, what can I do? What agency, what self-efficacy can I have in this situation in order to change it? I had another client who was in a decades-long, it's hard to even explain how this was, a decades-long affair with a person at work who had power over her. And it was one of those things where, number one, both of them were married, and it was one of those things where, wow, how do you stay in an affair for over, 20-some years? And her thought was that there was something spiritual about this relationship. There was something that, there could have been, but she was so enamored with the idea that he was going to leave his wife, he was going to leave the job, they were going to get together, all of these things were going to happen, all these romanticized ideas. After 20-some years, it's pretty clear it's not going to happen. And yet for her, she still had this idea that it was a spiritual reason that they were together. Now, it took quite a while for me to help her understand that the spiritual reason was probably for her to get out of an unhealthy, abusive relationship, which she had had, in her upbringing. That was kind of what happened. Her father was very abusive toward her, and I think, again, she kind of fell into this idea of thinking that it was a spiritual kind of experience to have this, because it was highly charged, highly sexual, highly intense, highly hidden, and so there was no way for her to actually enjoy this relationship. And yet for her, she thought it was a spiritual thing. And she would go out of sessions, she would go do meditation, she would go do tarot readings, she would do whatever she could to try to understand why she should stay in this, or not really why she should stay in this, but why this was happening, until one day it finally clicked for her to realize, oh, this is really unhealthy. This is really hurting me. This is really manipulative. It took quite a while of working with her to crack through it and help her see that her spiritual context for being in this relationship was the thing that she was holding on to, was actually keeping her in a bad situation. So like I said, I am the first person to encourage people to go to the higher limits. In other words, what I mean by that is the higher interpretation of what's happening in your life, but within the reason of you doing the work. What is my favorite question to ask? What are you supposed to learn from this? All of my clients have heard that question probably more than they want to, but when they're going through a difficult time, I ask, what is it that we're supposed to, process for you so you can learn from this? How can you evolve beyond your situation by experiencing this from a kind of a 3D level, kind of looking at this from a bigger picture? So I very much work with people about and endorse the idea of looking at the meaning, looking at the spiritual context. But I also have to show them to do the work. I have to show them they have to do the work to evolve beyond their issue. So going to God is great if you're doing the work. Praying is fantastic if it means you're finding the clarity and finding what it is that you need to do. And that is the other thing I want to throw out there, is that a lot of times when we say we're going to go to spirit, we're going to go to the stones, we're going to go to the runes, we're going to go to the cards, we're going to go to crystals, we're going to go to prayer, we're going to go to a prayer service. Anytime we say that, we're looking to live outside of ourselves. We're looking for answers from the outside in. And I personally believe that the universe, God, whatever you want to call the higher being, is here to help us become aware of our souls, become aware of who we are, and work within the context of our surroundings so that we can align ourselves at the highest level. But if we keep looking outside of ourselves for the answers, we're never going to get them. Can we look outside of ourselves to get affirmation or confirmation for what we're already thinking? Absolutely. And I think that is where the power is when you can maybe use a card or a rune or whatever to go, yeah, that's kind of what I've been feeling. That's kind of what I've been thinking. Every time, not every time, many times when a person comes to me for an Akashic record reading or soul realignment session or soul coaching or something like that, what happens is they're coming because they want affirmation or confirmation of what they're already feeling, but they don't have the confidence yet to believe it for themselves. And so sometimes they need to hear it from someone outside of themselves. That is different than spiritual bypassing. That is learning how to trust your soul. That is learning how to get into that soul space to go, yeah, this is what feels right for me. But if we constantly look outside of ourselves for answers, or we want someone else to make up the plan for us, or make up the answers, or make up the idea of what we're supposed to be doing, we're missing the point. And I think that is really what John Wellwood was talking about, is this whole idea of how do we come within ourselves to understand, to trust, and then that's how we become enlightened. It's not the other way around, where we go to prayer, we go to meditation, we go have psychedelic journeys, we go have all those things outside of ourselves. It's bringing it within to learn and develop that soul within us so that we can expand in that way. We can answer any question once we get aligned with our souls. And that's the point. And that's really, in the end, that's why I talk about what I talk about, is to help people align with themselves, get back in touch with their soul. Your soul will never lead you wrong. Our heads obviously will lead us wrong. Our hearts will lead us wrong, as I've demonstrated in those examples that I've provided to you. But our soul, our own soul, will never lead us wrong once we get in touch with it. And once we develop that connection, and once we develop that, I call it the soul sense, of just coming from that place to access your own wisdom, access your clarity, really clear up any misalignment that's within you. So spiritual bypassing is something to keep in mind. Are you leaning too much towards spirit or religion or religious practices or spiritual practices, or are you coming back to do your work? That is the key point in all of this. So I would love to hear questions and thoughts and concerns even. I know that I bring up a little bit of controversy when I talk about going to God or prayer, because it's such a charged topic. But you really have to kind of fan through or filter through all of the practices, all the things you've been taught to do or believe, and ask yourself, am I doing the work? Am I doing what I need to do to evolve and heal and grow beyond my situation? Because that is, as Einstein says, kind of the idea of insanity if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. I've had many clients recently realize that they've got to do the work, and part of it is me saying you've got to do the work, and other parts are like, wow, or other people are like, wow, we've been doing the same thing for a long time. Why can't I change this? So there's a lot to be said for basically understanding how spirituality can enhance your growth, and also how it can inhibit your growth if you're using it in the wrong ways. So again, I would love your questions, would love your concerns, would love your comments. Have a wonderful day, and more to come on. I talk about bringing ancient wisdom to the modern soul. This human condition thing is not easy. It is hard. And so bringing some of that ancient wisdom, bringing some of that way of looking at things and way of being is going to help you along the way, and that is what I'm here to do. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.